Hey guys, today we're reviewing Dune parts 1 and 2. There are some minor spoiler alerts. We're really talking kind of about what's underneath the sand more than what's happening in a climactic end. So it's probably safe to watch, but still, viewer beware. Here we go. I just saw Dune, the second part, with my family this weekend. Absolutely loved the movie, really swept away, but I had a bit of a download in the parking lot with my two young sons and my wife as I was just explaining some of the stuff, some of the elements that were incredibly influential but may have passed a lot of people's radar. And what I'm talking about is more of I would call it a religious psyop that's happening. It's something that's overall largely a negative thing in my worldview and purview. However, there are so many good elements that I just love this movie even so, but I want to be able to kind of spot the problem right off the rip. Now, to that end, I've got a buddy of mine. His name is Harrison Kone. Hey, Harrison, thanks so much for...
Hey, everybody.
Yeah, man. Harrison is an author. He wrote the book Saber Down, which was incredible. Also, The Defection Protocol. You've got a third one that just released as well in the trilogy.
It's later
this summer. And
yeah, called Invictus.
Yeah. Great name for a book, man. Way to go.
Thank you.
Anyway, I love Harrison Kone's writing. Great author, incredible mind, and he's a big Frank Herbert fan. So he's read all the Dune books. You've seen Dune 1, but you haven't seen this Dune 2 yet, right?
Yeah, I haven't seen part 2 yet.
What I wanted to do is I wanted to give a go, Harrison, about what I think the worldview of the Dune universe is. And I want you to tell me if that's kind of true to Herbert and what he was getting at. Is that cool?
Yeah, sounds great.
All right, sounds good. So overall, Frank Herbert is dealing with kind of religious zealotry, and you see it in the trappings of the Freemen. They are kind of like pulling some bits of Judaic culture. They've got some Islamic culture. They've got some Christian ideas and culture, and it's all kind of wrapped in. And that is the kind of fundamentalists. This is the religious people, and they have all these prophecies that are built together in this world of Dune. Now, also, there's a overarching New Age spiritualistic force, which is really pantheistic. Now, in the fundamentalists that we already described of the Freemen, there isn't actually religious power. There's nothing to it. However, with the Bene Gesserits and with Paul being able to see glimpses of the future and the past and know details about people's lives that he's never met, there is some kind of real mystical actual power being tapped into. Now, what we should understand is this is more of a pantheistic worldview, much like Star Wars has the Force. And so they may even make a scientific declaration of how this works out. So like the metachlorines in the Force is what comprises all the galaxy, and you can plug into nature to be able to control nature, much like a wizard or a witch does. This is also spiritism, but what we should understand is this is a pantheistic New Age conception. But what we see in the movie is there's actual real spiritual power. And so the idea of what the God is in Dune is a God is all and in all in a pantheistic, pagan, and occult kind of idea. Whereas the fundamentalists, all their prophecy, which looks really, really interesting, and it's playing out of the prophecy looks legitimate. It was all planted by the Bene Gesserits, who are really manipulating, but they're plugged into this, the God that is them and is all around them, that New Age conception of God. And so it ends up being all the organized religion is a big sham. Harrison, how'd I do?
Yeah, I'd say mostly right on the money. Absolutely. The main focus of it all is that there is this cataclysmic annihilation event that's set to take place in the future that's going to wipe out all of humanity. It's this prophecy, and that there's only one individual that can see the path that humanity needs to take in order to prevent that from happening. Think Ender's Game, when Doctor Strange has the stone and he goes through, not Ender's Game, excuse me, the Endgame, Avengers Endgame, and he's going through all the different possible futures to find out how to beat Thanos, and he tells Iron Man, there's only one, right? That's kind of this same situation. Is there's only one way to prevent galaxy-wide annihilation of humanity, and they need the Kiswak Haderach in order to do that. And I always butcher the pronunciation. He's got some weird pronunciations in his stuff, but they need Paul in order to, divert this calamity that's coming.
Got it. So I really liked Paul, and I want to delve into some of the qualities that have just been missing in a lot of protagonists in all these different movies. And so when I saw Dune 1, I didn't like Paul right off the rip. He just looked like teeny bopper boy band to me. And I'm like, oh, this fatally flawed, kind of like all of our cartoon movies. It's this little bird with an injured wing or something, and he's going to be, proving that he's special for some. Anyway, it was that kind of thing. And I'm like, all right, fatally flawed, wounded protagonist. I'm supposed to root for this guy anyway. But he really surprised me, and I wanted to get into that. But first, I want to lean just a touch more into the religious elements, and I want you to have my back. And then really, let's unpack some of Dune in general together, and I want to lean in on you. So right now I'm talking more, but you'll be talking more in a moment because, man, you've read all this stuff. So what I didn't like about the religious kind of worldview is I think the awful psyop here is in Christianity there is real unexplicable prophecy that's happened. It's an extremely powerful argument to prove that the Bible is actually written by a God outside of time, calling the end from the beginning and having all these hundreds and hundreds of prophecies which are actually accomplished in Christ. And so that is a big bulwark of how we know that Jesus was the Christ who was predicted. And so there's an axe that lands at the root of the fundamentalist tree in the Dune universe here, and that's prophecy, no matter how compelling, is actually just a manipulation. It's used to control a people, and so even if it looks really, really good, it's a conspiracy, it's a manipulation, and it can't be trusted. And I'm like, that is really an awful thing to take in the mind of somebody and plant that little seed. Now, they could end up rejecting very good evidence for the Christian worldview just because they were already primed to be suspicious of any prophecy, regardless of how good the evidence is. What do you think about that take? Because when I took my boys out of the theater, that's the very first thing I mentioned. That's the big dangerous psyop that I was aware of.
Yeah, it reminds me of the Jewish priests, the high priests at the time of Jesus. Jesus is doing all these, amazing miracles, and you would think, I have a cousin who's like, well, they saw Jesus reattach an ear that Peter cut off. Why didn't they believe in that moment? Mm-hmm. It's like, well, they were so hardened against the prophecies, and they were just blind to it. The Lord didn't open their hearts. And so when you look at Stilgar, and there's this meme that's going around of like, oh, the Lisan al-Gib tied his shoes, and Stilgar is speechless. Only the Muad'Dib could have tied his shoes, right? And it's this religious fervor that they've all bought into deceptively, that there is going to be one who will set them all free. And what it is, it's a subversion, as you mentioned, of the Bene Gesserit. It's these women that have been implanted, almost like missionaries, like this sick twist on missionaries, not to bring freedom, but to bring oppression, to bring such a belief that they'd be willing to die for. And it's not rooted in anything real other than what the Bene Gesserit with their voice is able to conjure up in these people.
Right.
So it's really kind of a really sadistic twist on what a Christian missionary is. I
think so. Now, I think Herbert could have gone way worse and made the freemen something that was not noble, but we see the exact opposite. So though these people are obviously manipulated and they're wrong in their worldview of God and how the universe is constructed, they're naive, they're at least noble and brave. And so it's not like he waged an all-out war on religion. However, at the same time, I wonder if what he's doing isn't more destructive. If you just attack something wholesale, then people are more prone to reject it. And instead, if you give them some good stuff, but then one fatal kind of piece in there, that's actually more destructive because nobody's guard is up anymore. And so I didn't like that. Also, Paul Atreides, the protagonist, this young guy that I actually really liked, some elements I really didn't like is they are just taking ideas from Christianity and subverting them and twisting them. So Paul is a false Messiah. He is a son. He's known as, the house of Atreides. He is the promised son who is supposed to take over and rule. And he comes down from the heavens to become the savior of a people whom he's prophesied to lead. And then he has some type of a false death and a false resurrection to lead them into the promised land. And so I'm like, it's literally just taking the messianic promises of Christ, subverting them, sticking them on Paul Atreides, but instead of bringing a message of truth, because everything Paul's doing is based on a lie built by the Bene Gesserit, and instead of him standing for love, he stands for hate and vengeance. Instead of God delivering mercy, he's giving wrath and no mercy. And so it's a false savior in every respect. And somebody who doesn't understand the obvious stealing from Christianity, but assigning its power to the occult, isn't paying any attention. It was so flagrant and obvious to me that it was real off-putting. And if you notice it, then you can, I think, ingest it, enjoy the spectacular imagery and the wonderful storyline, but understand they ripped off a bunch of stuff, used it to undermine the sources that the beauty and truth actually came from and assign it to I think, a crappy theological worldview, pantheism, which is not logically sufficient for anything, of like all that is God. So we're just illusory, and morality is completely irrelevant. As if God is all and there is evil, then God is partially evil, and there's no reason to be Mother Teresa or Stalin. They're both the same because all is God. And it's just absolutely unintelligible nonsense. However, it's not, you don't see the flaws in it. And so anyway, people just asleep, enjoying a beautiful movie, ingest all these ideas, I think, to their detriment. And so that's the big negative. Do you have anything to say on that?
I do. It's the Book of Eli issue where the whole time he's protecting the sacred text, and it's portrayed through the whole movie as this is the last Bible. Yeah. And, then you have it's in Braille and no one else can read it. And it's the bad guy wants it not because it's truth, but because it represents power and, authority over people. But then in the end, after this major sacrifice, he dies, he recites the whole Bible by memory. It's just put on the shelf with the Quran and the Bhagavad Gita and all these other religious texts, just like one of many. And I think that that's just a result of postmodernism. And I think Frank Herbert, based on his writings, I never met the guy, I don't know the guy, but he, through his writing, is very evidently, I think, a postmodernist. Yeah. Because he has created something called the Orange Catholic Bible in the story. And the Josh Brolin character, Gurney Halleck, he is a really strong, good character in the story. His morality is unwavering, his loyalty is unwavering. He's kind of he's a man's man. Like, we all can relate to him, right? Perhaps more so than Paul. And so he is a very religious individual in the story. He's always quoting from this Orange Catholic Bible. But the other very religious character is Dr. Yue, the traitor. So we have two people that are dedicated to the only surviving religion, that one is really wicked and one is really good. Got it. And so already we see that postmodern tension of like, oh, religion is what we make of it type scenario. Also, the Orange Catholic Bible is it's blasphemous in the sense it uses the term Bible, but it brings in influence from all these other religions, from Buddhism, from Christianity, Christianity, of course, is the best, but Islam, Hinduism. It's basically Frank Herbert's statement on all religion is the same.
Got it.
And we see some of these quotes, and on the seventh day he rested. Thou shalt not suffer a witch to live. The meek shall inherit the universe, right? So he's shifting some of this stuff already. Thou shalt not make a machine in the likeness of the human mind, right? And so one of the things with Paul, I know you want to talk about Paul here, is Paul has this freak out moment in the first movie about a jihad, right? He's in the tent and he's like, oh, this jihad, galactic jihad. Well, knowing his history, there was a jihad with AI, and AI tried to overthrow humanity, and that's why there are no machines with the human mind. And so Paul has this fear about jihad because he knows his history, and that's why he takes on this mantle of the Muad'Dib with hesitancy and fear, right? And so when we see Herbert already from the beginning twisting religion in a very common way, and almost you could say he might have been one of the forerunners of this. George Lucas took a lot of inspiration from Frank Herbert. We have The Force because of Dune. We have Jedi mind tricks because of the Bene Gesserit voice.
So Lucas was taking from Herbert here.
He's a fan of Herbert, yeah.
No kidding. How about that? So I was right to draw the parallel, the metachlorine business, right?
You were. And even to the point where we have Anakin, the chosen one of this prophecy that really has no root or basis or established point. Like when we look at Christianity, God delivers a prophecy to Jeremiah, to Isaiah, to all these different prophets, and those come to pass. Well, to my knowledge, there's no like root of the prophecy. There's no giver of the prophecy. There's no like starting point. It's just there. In the same way in Star Wars, it's just there. Oh, there's a prophecy. And you know how many wrong prophecies there were in the Bible? Not in the Bible, but like by enemies, like people that tried to prophesy against Israel. Yeah. Thinking about Balaam and the donkey, like prophesy wickedness, but God wouldn't let him, right? So there's prophecy. And also you think about prophecies in Buddhism and Hinduism and Islam and stuff that doesn't come true. So prophecy as a whole is not, in my opinion, the just because it's a prophecy doesn't make it true. It's the giver of the prophecy that makes it true.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And so we don't know who the giver of the prophecy is in Dune. We just know that there's an order of a matriarchal order that is manipulating all politics in human life with a just end to save humanity from annihilation, but none of them are going to be alive to see it. So already we see that corruption begin to set in that order. And that's why Jessica chooses to have a son, because she's a true believer in the prophecy, as opposed to the witches being like, you weren't supposed to have a son, you vain person who thought you could bring about the prophesied one, right? So there's a lot there to unpack, but in short, it's almost and all science fiction tries to be a commentary on something, and I believe that Frank Herbert's a commentary that really sparked this postmodern movement in science fiction. He's like the king of science fiction, right? He's wrote this book in the early, or I want to say it was like the early 70s or late 60s, and it's really shaped science fiction forever. You look at Star Wars then shaping it. So it's this compounding incrementalism that then shapes thought.
Got it. So Herbert, I mean, how many books comprise the Dune series?
Yeah, there are 6 books written by Frank, and then his son Brian capitalized on his father's success and wrote a bunch. They're all pretty much regarded as garbage, but he wrote a lot. I've not read any of his because people are like, hey, he's just trying to grab money, if I may be so bold to say. But,
got it. What did you think of those 6? And how, the movies, it's Dune 1 and 2. That covers just the first book. Is that right?
Yeah, I believe that the first and the second book are the only ones that are really worth it. Okay. The rest, they just get weird after this.
What do you mean weird? Well, because it's not starting out completely.
Sure. No, it gets weird. So basically, Paul has this responsibility and to save humanity, but he realizes just the cost is too high. So he blinds himself and like wanders the desert for the rest of his life kind of deal. And then his son, Leto the second, becomes this half-human.
He blinds himself?
Yeah, he
puts out his eyes and just wanders around the desert?
Yeah, just so he's not a burden or a danger to anyone. And I mean, there's symbolism there, right? He sees everything, right? He can see everything that happens, and so he blinds himself. so that he's not a threat. Again, going back to this fear of jihad and whatnot. But his son, Leto II, this is where things get weird. And this is where I just kind of draw the line with my own interests. Because at the end of the day, it's a story, right? It's not history. It's nothing more than a story. And it's full of plot holes. It's full of issues because it's a flawed man writing a flawed story.
Right.
Lord of the Rings, full of issues, phenomenal. But we have to remember, Lord of the Rings, we talk about it like it's history, but it's not history. It's fiction. It lived in this dude's head, right?
Yeah.
So it's the same with Frank Herbert. And so basically Leto II becomes half human, half sandworm, half Shai Lahud, so he can like rule everyone through telepathic enslavement. And then you just kind of lose me at that point. I'm like, all right. It's like with the second book of the Foundation series, you have this all-powerful psychotic, that's actually a Freudian slip there, telepathic creature, humanoid that can control everything. It's like, all right, you lost me personally from a story point. So it gets weird in that it begins to change what makes humans humans. And I just personally don't dig that.
No, that resonates when you're reading some type of suspense thriller that desires to be mysterious and otherworldly. You can make all these story gaps. The reader follows on hoping that all these loose ends are going to tie together in this exciting, perfect way. And when you can't do it, you start losing people, or you do a cheap tie-in, and usually that amounts to time travel. You get about five books or movies in, you can't do all the loose ends, and time travel. And I'm like, all right, you suck.
Avengers, right?
Yeah, Avengers. I remember the Lost TV series. So good. And a few seasons in, and I wasn't as theologically and philosophically trained at the time, but even back then, I realized, all right, this is going universalistic, and there's no way they're going to be able to tie all this together. And ultimately, they did it of time travel, and you're in kind of this purgatory-ish state, and all roads lead to the same space, and it's mystical. And so anyway, I felt like it was a cheap way to buy all their problems out in one fell swoop because you couldn't actually pull the pieces in. And that when it was really first on my radar. But it's kind of like, Lost definitely lost me in that sense.
Indeed.
So you said there's holes in Lord of the Rings. If you could go back, take Tolkien under your shoulder and be like, bro, you got to change this one thing.
I wouldn't dare.
Come on, you just said that there was problems. Let's say he asked you to. He asked you to.
God made man, right? Man made the Lord of the Rings. And God said, that's what I'm talking about.
That is terrible nerd joke.
Yeah, you're welcome.
It's good, but it is also terrible. I have immediately something. Gandalf, the great wizard, seemed to just possess, unless he's fighting a Balrog, he just seemed to possess the magical power of flashlight.
Yes.
That's what he's doing. Other than that, he's hitting people with a stick and a sword, and he's just like every other Joe. He's just an old, angry man hitting people with a stick and a sword. I want to see some magic stuff. I want to see him kind of like pop some orcs with a, orb, or set everyone on fire or something. Why is he just hitting people with a stick? Yeah. And then flashlight the dragons, flashlight the cave, and that was lame. And I read all the books. I even read the Silmarillion, and I know there's exceptions to what I'm saying, but by and large, what I'm saying is true.
Yes,
and that's annoying.
Yeah. I agree with you there. My first thought when you asked me that is it's the conundrum of Gandalf. He lights some pine cones on fire with blue and green. He basically uses his fireworks to fight off orcs and wargs. But essentially, my advice to Tolkien, that just sounds weird to say, would be, hey, when you write The Hobbit, Gandalf is just the wizard. He's just this goofy wizard that knows things and can take them. But in The Lord of the Rings, he's a Maiar. He's a demigod. Yeah. So there's a change in Gandalf's character between The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings. And so my advice wouldn't necessarily be advice. It'd be more of a question. It'd be like, hey, Tolkien, did you know who Gandalf was when you wrote The Hobbit?
Yeah.
Did you know he was the Maiar? If that's the case, maybe make him that in The Hobbit. And that would be the only thing I think that I can think of immediately. But my point is not so much that The Lord of the Rings is full of holes. It's just human-made story is always full of holes. It
That's
always is. It's one of the Tolkien's quoted. He says, "I had a young man ask me why they didn't just take a boat down to Gondor," and he says, "Well, the
yeah.
reason is shut up." Like he says,
Great.
just like
I would have hitched a ride on an eagle
Yeah.
in Fellowship of the Ring. About 15 minutes in, you get on an eagle, you do an aerial op, fly over Mordor, drop the ring, and then you go home, and that's it. That's it.
Mary
You're good
Rosie.
to go. You don't even have to get stabbed by a ghost cool.
Yeah.
It'll be great.
Yeah.
I think Peter Jackson's interpretation was awesome in that he wrote in more of Arwen's love story, and she is barely in the books.
Yeah.
She's just like a beginning and an end, and then they were married. And I'm like, no, Jackson did better in that respect,
Agreed.
and that's rare where you could do that. Hey, let's get back to Dune. I liked Paul Atreides.
Yeah.
I had said before I wrote him out as this like Pee-wee beta boy bandish guy, but he impressed me in Dune 1, and then he continued in Dune 2. He is a leader. He is assertive. He is decisive. He is resourceful.
Yeah.
He is leading people with a conviction, which is amazing. He can receive advice, take it, but then he's his own man and he makes his own decisions, and he's incredibly courageous. And so all those characteristics are classic masculinity. Yeah. All those attributes, that's what a man is. And we haven't really seen, in large part, that consolidation of masculine traits in a protagonist in quite a while. Yeah. And if they do, they're neurotic and narcissistic and fatally flawed in those respects. But no, he's more of a masculine figure than I usually see anywhere in movies now. Yeah. And so I really appreciate that. He is his own man. And that was really, really refreshing to me.
I 100% agree. I don't think we've had a character on the screen in this way since Aragorn, Viggo Mortensen's Aragorn, to tie that back in. In the book, Paul has this constant sense of purpose and duty. And what I appreciate about the movie is we are taken on a character development journey from kind of this very capable teenager, right? Like maybe perhaps more capable than any teenager alive today, just in general, and fighting and understanding. And, he's just this prodigy of a young man. And the movie, the first one, does a great job of taking him from, but why, to I know my purpose. And when we see that, it's almost like a roadmap of how we should live in our own lives. And that's going to your point earlier, like, hey, there's great things we can pull out of the movie, and there's not so great things that we can pull out of the movie. We need to recognize both. And I think one of them is Paul's realization that the path that he's going to take could lead to utter jihad and devastation if he doesn't manage it well. And there's this healthy fear about the power that he wields. He's understanding this religious fervor that has been created among the Fremen, their capability of taking on. They don't really do a great job of this in the movie, the first movie, but in the book, there's the Sudokar, right? The really intense, blood on the forehead, emperors, chosen prison world super soldiers. In the book, there's a scene where they just wipe out a whole troop of Sudokar with no losses. And the Atreides just can't believe it. They're like, what are you talking about? And you don't get that in the movie as much. It's just like, yeah, we're going toe to toe. And when Jason Momoa's character cuts down all these Sudokar, it's
great scene, by the way.
It's awesome. It's like every man's like vision, the way they have to go out. Yeah.
And he needed redemption from Aquaman. Those were terrible, terrible movies. So he needed a win.
He did, and so that scene of Jason Momoa's last stand against a Sudokar, it's unreal. The level of in the book that Duncan Idaho is able to go toe to toe with numerous of these special soldiers that feel no pain, and they're the best in the universe. And so then when you see the Fremen are able to do that as well, but on a level that it's not even like Jason Momoa he's mortally wounded, he's gonna die, he's he wins in this last feat of strength, a Samson moment, right?
Yeah,
And
that's great.
then
All of Herbert's best ideas borrowed from the Bible, by the way. It's all stealing from the Bible and repurposing in this. Yeah.
And then,
good.
but when the Fremen do it, it's like, oh yeah, what, like, sure. Like, yeah, we killed him. Yeah, whatever. There's just this, they're on another level of skill. Wow. And so for Paul to step in and beat them in one-on-one combat, already we see, okay, Paul as a kid is, the weirding way, which is kind of unexplained in the books, but it's this fighting style that they all want to learn. The Fremen want to learn from Paul and Jessica. And so there's this power that Paul possesses that is already beyond that of a normal person. So Paul was a character that we can look at and be like, Paul's the man. He's a great figure to look at for not only being strong, being fit, being this, warrior poet, but also his restraint and like realizing he could have launched this massive galactic crusade, but he found a way not to, and to still get the power he needed in the end through minimal losses. Like it's just the wisdom that Paul possesses. It probably helps to be, fictitiously omniscient. But
yes, his
wisdom,
that would certainly help my decision making.
It would. So his wisdom is also something to be admired, is my point.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Aside from that, just to kind of wrap up Dune 1 and 2 as movies, it was really just remarkable. The scenic, landscapes, the action, the fighting, the surprises. I thought the storyline and building tension and character developments, and then reaching climaxes and then pulling out of them and then reinserting them. It was really, I think, masterful storytelling. It was beautiful. In their use of special effects and scenes, had different moods every time you kind of went to Ben Shapiro. I didn't listen to his review, but I did hear just a clip of his where he's talking about you'll visit multiple other worlds and they all had their own kind of color schemes to it. And I remember watching that and noticing that too, of like, it seemed like they had these big kind of themes in their I forget the dude's name. He played Elvis in that recent Elvis movie, but that was the kind of arch enemy who's fighting gladiatorially in an arena, and he's going to show down with Paul at the end. And that was a real awful sociopath, sick, twisted, demonic kind of figure for the messianic figure there to war against.
Yeah.
But
what they don't tell you is that in the books, it's one of them is the Kiswak Haderach. Like, it's either Freyd Lutha Harkonnen or it's Paul Atreides. So you really have a duel of the fates moment between the two. Whoever wins either saves humanity or dooms humanity. It's this massive at stakes moment that you didn't get when Sting portrayed him in the original awful movie. And I don't know that you get in the movies either, just because we don't have all the Bene Gesserit history that's portrayed in the movie. So Villanueva is obviously this big fan, and it goes to show that when you have a director who is a fan of the source material, you get a good movie.
That's good.
But the stakes of that fight, I hope, really relay what is actually at stake for all of humanity. But I feel like it might miss it just because we didn't get the build-up in the first movie of the prophetic annihilation that's coming for humanity that only Paul could stop. And so if Paul lost through trickery, right, the poison blade and all this stuff that Freyd Lutha tries to use against him, like the stakes are astronomically high.
Why didn't Paul just use the voice at the beginning of the fight and be like, stab yourself in the throat?
That is a great question. Again, a plot hole.
Why didn't Kylo Ren freeze everybody in Star Wars and just like send his lightsaber through the whole army? And why didn't Gandalf just set everyone on fire?
It's great questions.
Why does everyone who has magic suck at the use of magic?
Makes for a better story. These
are my questions. Yeah. Awesome. Well, hey, man, Harrison, thanks so much for schooling us up on some Dune. I had a great time. Appreciate it. where can folks find you, and where can people buy your books?
Yeah, so you can find me at harrisonkone.com, Kone. And so you can actually get a free short story if you subscribe to my newsletter, and then all my books are available on Amazon.
Awesome. Guys, I promise you, Harrison Kone, an incredible writer. Very,
Appreciate
very
it.
good. And we're writing a book together. So how many words in are
Over
we now?
55,000.
Yeah, all right. Yeah, 55,000. So we need another
25 or so.
Yep, very good. So we're chipping away at it, having some fun. So can't wait to see where it gets. Well, we've already kind of written the ending, and a lot in the middle and the beginning, but filling in the details and stuff. We've been having a blast.
It's been a lot of fun.
Anyway, cool, guys. Thanks for tuning in. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel, like, share, comment. Nope, I already said subscribe. If you subscribe twice, that actually unsubscribes you. So belay that last piece. Just subscribe one time. We'll see you next time. See you guys.